The 365 Pro Wrestling.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is episode number 78 of the 365 Pro Wrestling Podcast, and today's guest, none other than Addy Starr. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
No, thank you so much for being part of this and all this craziness in the world. How are you surviving?
I'm doing okay. I'm really fortunate and blessed that I'm working from home still, so I'm keeping busy. We have 700 video games in my apartment, so we're okay and keeping occupied that way. I've done more interviews and podcasts in the last 4 weeks than I think I've done in my entire wrestling career. So, all things considered, it's not going that badly. So yeah, not bad.
We're pretty lucky with all the technology we have in this day and age that a lot of people can still stay in good touch, and we can do interviews like this over Skype or Zoom or whatever anyone uses. So it's pretty amazing the technology we have and tools we have in this time.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking 15 years ago, I was actually telling my boyfriend the other day, if this happened in 1998, we'd all be completely screwed. So I think, we're doing all right.
There'd be torches burning and looting everywhere. It'd be nuts. Yep. But let's rewind all the way back to the beginning. You started training at only 17 years old. How was that for you? Did you know you were young in training, or was it just I like this, I'm gonna do it?
I think everyone should know, first of all, that you were there.
I was.
So, So however long ago that was, 15 years ago, almost 15 years ago. I think for me, it wasn't weird and I didn't feel that young just because I had just graduated from high school. So when you're that age, you feel like you're totally grown up and know everything. So I just kind of came into it being this is the next step in what I'm going to do. I really wanted to stay athletic because I had always been someone who did sports and was in shape and did things, athletic all the time. So going to wrestling was kind of this is what I'm going to do now that I'm out of high school. So it was a little overwhelming, just I think actually starting in the world of wrestling, because there was just so much to take on and so much to figure out, because it's this weird secret society that nobody tells you about when you get there. So other than that, I don't think it felt super overwhelming being young, and I'm actually really glad that I started that young, because I meet people now who say they started training when they were 27, 28, and I'm oh my God, I hurt now, as a 30-year-old. I can't even imagine what it's gonna be if you're starting in your 30s. So yeah, I mean, I'm really happy I started when I did.
Now, you didn't follow wrestling too much when you were a youth at all. You found out about the school through an ex-boyfriend, but when you started wrestling, it became your world, and nothing else mattered. It seemed you were just so focused on it, and during that time in class, you just really put forth so much effort, and it almost came easy to you. Would you say?
I think I had almost an advantage. I always tell people this, by not really knowing much about wrestling and not having watched it, I didn't really have this expectation of what I was supposed to be doing. Because you get some people that come, now that I do training seminars and I help people in training schools, it's very strange that you see people come in and they're oh, I've been watching, The Rock my whole life, so I want to wrestle like The Rock. And you're okay, that's fine, but you can't expect to be there right away. So for me coming in, I was okay, I don't have any expectations. I don't know what I'm supposed to wrestle like. I'm just going to do what I'm told and try my best, because I have no other, way of thinking. So I think it was that I had this, like I said, a weird advantage. And I just really wanted to do well and prove to everyone that even though I wasn't a wrestling fan, I could still do it. And I was still going to be good enough athletically to be able to take part in this.
And you really were. You know what? After you said that, it made me think. I did a youth class with kids from like, my son was like 7 to like 10-year-olds, and they were easier to train than the 18 to like 25-year-olds, and they just knew the steps. It blew me away. And I think because they didn't have any expectations, they didn't know what they're doing. They're just following the guidelines or what I was saying, and it just came to them. All we did was rolls and chain wrestling, no bumps, but like they got it down. So I've never thought about that before. So that's blowing my mind right now. But what do you take from training? Like, what do you remember from it the most?
I definitely remember it being this like little like family group that we had. We all had like little nicknames for each other, and we were all kind of like making fun of each other, but like in like the most like kind, loving way. It was like a little family that I became a part of so quickly. And I think especially because when I was 17, I was having a really rough time. I was really not doing well at home. Like I had like just barely graduated high school. I didn't have plans to go to university. Like nothing was really going for me. So I remember being so excited to go to training and being so happy that I got to like hang out with these people that kind of like had the same goal that I did. It was kind of like, 3 hours that I could just do something fun that was really exciting and felt so cool and felt so empowering, where I didn't have to worry about all the other stuff that was going on. So that was something like not a lot of people knew about, but like I was temporarily like homeless for a time when I was going to training too. So even in like those, like that month or so where I was homeless, I was like still wanting to go to training. And it was like just another place that I felt like safe and able to go and have a little bit of fun and stop worrying about what was going on. So that's kind of like my biggest takeaway from it was it kind of like saved me from a time that was not the best in my life. So I don't know if, it was one of the better times in that period of my life.
Do you remember anything that was challenging? Because like I said, you took direction really well and you were very capable. Was there anything that you remember, like a headlock takeover being hard or something, or any part of training that was tough?
I remember having to really grasp that whole like work through the pain kind of thing, because that was really tricky for me, because I remember like in all the other sports that I did if you got hurt, like you should like stop and like make sure that you're okay and like figure out what's going on. But in wrestling, it's kind of this like you can't really stop if something hurts or you like kind of forget something or mess up. Like you've got to just go. And that was something that really kind of freaked me out at first. I remember I took a backslide in training and landed really hard on my like head and neck because I weigh like 100 pounds less than everyone, and everyone seemed to forget that in training. So I took this like one backslide, I remember, and just crash landed, and I felt everything pop down the side of my neck, and it felt horrible, and it was in a lot of pain. And I remember trying to like get out of the ring, and like you and a couple of the people standing there just being like, no, you have to keep going. And I was like, and then the overwhelming response was like, if you're not like dead or like literally not able to walk, you should probably keep going. And I was like, oh no. And that really freaked me out. So that was like one of the challenges. Like eventually, like I kind of like learned what it meant to like work through something that was maybe like a little bit painful, if you get the wind knocked out of you, or if you like kind of get rocked a little bit. I learned how to sort of deal with that, which is really, really important now, especially when I'm wrestling people who have like less experience than me. Like being able to kind of control things and stay in that zone is really important. And I also remember that one of the big challenges was people that knew more about wrestling than I did trying to like talk to me about wrestling, and me having like no idea what they were talking about. I remember like, because people will call moves by like the names of wrestlers. So people will be like, oh, like the Shawn Michaels thing where he does this. And I'm like, no, I have no idea what you're talking about. And that was super challenging for me, was people thinking that I belonged there. Just at the very, very beginning, because I didn't know like who all these people were. I didn't know the history. It almost felt like I was like disrespecting the industry and the sport because I didn't know who all these people were. So that was hard, that I had to really prove that I still had respect for it. And I did my homework. Like I watched tapes and tapes and tapes, and I like went online, like was right when YouTube was starting to be a big thing. And I was watching old matches, and I was like really putting the work in. That was really hard, as well, was catching up on the so many years that I had missed that everyone else had already.
For sure, no doubt. I didn't even think about that, but it was a big part of it. Now, I remember Eazy-E was always calling moves by like the wrestlers' names all the time, so that must have been annoying. It kills me to this day. They go to each spot that way, but it drives me nuts. Some of them fine. That's their move, but he kills me. In September 8th, 2006, you made your debut for PWA. I believe it was me and Dania versus you and Warhead. Do you remember anything from the match?
Oh, God. I remember I did my first ever tornado DDT in that match.
Nice.
My tribute to Masato Tanaka.
Yep.
I remember I had terrible gear. Like everyone should in their first match. Everyone should absolutely have the worst gear that you've like made yourself. Otherwise, you shouldn't be wrestling. So I remember that. I remember my family was there because it was in Guelph. So one of like the coolest things I think about my career is that I got to debut in my hometown in front of like my family and some of my friends. Like I don't think many people get to do that. So that was like pretty much the coolest thing. I got to do some actual wrestling moves, which I never thought I would do. I always thought that I was just going to get beat up forever. Yeah, it was exciting. And I remember I cried after the match. I was so like emotional about it. Yeah, I don't even remember. I think I lost. I probably lost. We usually lose when we start. I think I think I took a Rikishi driver through a chair from you, maybe.
Probably.
I think so. Yes.
One of my favorite moments in Guelph actually includes you. We were trying to put ourselves through these tables as head, PD, and me, and we couldn't do it. You weren't even involved in, like, you were a manager of the match, but for some reason you climbed up and you jumped off the top rope and you put both of us through the table and the crowd went bananas.
I remember
the noise, that reaction. I'm like, that was cool. Like, it was one of those coolest moments in Guelph to me.
I remember that because my mom was there. It was like one of the first times I'd ever like kind of been involved. I was just managing. And I remember like jumping. I remember you guys trying to go through the table. Like, it's hilarious now. Like, that should definitely be on Botchmania if it's not. Matthew, I'll send you the tape if we find it. So I remember seeing it and I was like, ooh. And I didn't know like back then that it hurts way more when it doesn't break. Like, I know that now. But I had no idea. So I think it was like Warhead just like called the audible, like, you're going up. And I'm like, okay. And again, being like 17, 18, going up and just being terrified. And the reaction was amazing. And I remember looking over at my mom, Rings, and she was just like freaking out. She was like standing up and screaming and cheering. And I got nicknamed Bam Bam Bigelow for like a year or two after that, because everyone's like, there's no way that you could have put them through that table unless you like transformed into Bam Bam Bigelow midair. So yeah, I definitely remember that moment.
Man, that was crazy to me. What do you remember about like Southern Ontario? Because you moved to Ottawa, was it in 2009?
Yeah, 2008, 2009, around there.
Yeah, so in that, before you moved to Ottawa, I thought you were doing good things, you were getting out there, but like once you moved to Ottawa, I thought you blew up.
I always attribute that to interspecies wrestling, because way back in the day, I'm sure you remember the Ontario Indie Wrestling message boards.
Yes,
we were all over the boards. Yeah. So I remember posting, like, not even as a wrestler, just like as like a person involved in wrestling, just being like, hey, I'm moving to Ottawa for university. I don't know what's going on up there, but I'm going to be around. Like, if anyone runs shows, I'd love to come hang out. It was literally just like I want to come meet people. That was it. So Mike Roch, the guy who runs Interspecies Wrestling, messaged me, and he was like, "Hey, like, love to meet you, hang out. Like, if you're looking for friends and don't really know anyone, like, feel free to get in touch." So it started out as just like this like friendship with him. Like we ended up chatting a lot and hanging out and playing some video games and just like doing some stuff together. And he knew Player Uno and now Evil Uno and Stu Grayson, and we all became friends. So it was more like a friendship that then turned into me going to a couple shows because they were on a few shows in the area, and I just went with them just to hang out. And one of the perks of being a female wrestler is that if you show up to a show, you're probably going to get booked because they don't usually have that many women, especially at the time. And I think there were only about 3 women in the area in Ottawa at the time. There was like Misty, Shanae, and Portia. Those were like the 3 main women in the Ottawa area. So adding one more was like perfect. They could finally do like tag matches or like maybe a few different matchups that hadn't happened before. So it was one, just getting in with the right people at the right time. And, you know, being a female wrestler in a place where there was such a demand. And then places like C4 blew up around that time as well. And I was working pretty regularly for C4. I was working for ISW in Montreal. And because Montreal is so close and there's so many good promotions in Montreal, that was getting me a lot of work. So I think it was just, I did it at the right time. I did it right when it was all going on this upwards trend. So it was really lucky on my part.
For sure. And now, did you do many hardcore matches for us, or was it just a spot now and then? Because you're one of the only, like, not the only, but in Canada, one of the premier like hardcore wrestling ladies. There's Precious Lucy always, but like, how many people can say they've done much of that? And you've done a ton of that.
Yeah, I think it was interesting. So when I was wrestling for PWA, it was always either a hardcore match or it was getting the crap kicked out of me by one of the other girls. Like it was no in between. I don't remember having any just like normal matches. So I think it was kind of like it became my thing, and I definitely wanted it to be my thing. Like I always tell people that the first full wrestling show I ever watched was the IWA 95 King of the Death match from Japan. So for me, like that was the first exposure I had, and the first thing that I wanted to do was do matches like that. So I think, yeah, I was pushing for a lot of hardcore matches. I really wanted to do hardcore. I think I remember asking specifically to do like no rope barbed wire matches and things like that. And you guys were like, yeah, sure. Why not? So that's great. But yeah, I think for women, it is just like me and Lufisto really who are like known for it. There's a few in the States now. But in terms of like women who do hardcore and still are wrestlers and have great wrestling matches as well, not too many. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. Now, in where was it? I think it was in Ottawa. You and Jeff Black had a match, and you just lost a ton of blood. Do you remember that matchup?
Oh my god! I make fun of him every time I see him. Like literally every time I see Jeff Black, I'm like, hey, remember that time you like ruined wrestling in Ottawa for us? Yeah. Because we got kicked out of that venue because of that. So we were so the promoter is like approaching me and he's like, I want you to do a hardcore match. Like it'd be great. And I'm like, cool. I think someone who I'd have a great hardcore match with is Jeff Black because I had seen him do some PWA. So the promoter's like, yeah, no problem. We'll bring him up. So brings him up. We have this like huge, great match planned, had some really cool spots. It was like a 6-sided ring. So we had all this cool stuff we were going to do. And literally, first chair shot that I give this guy, he just like slices from like ear to ear. Like I can't even comprehend how it happened or what he did, but ear to ear, wide open, looks like a smiley face on his forehead. I'm like, oh my God. And he's just like, he would like put his shirt up to like wipe the blood. And as soon as he like brings his shirt down, it's just like back being red again. Like it was unbelievable. So the match probably went, I want to say it's on YouTube. I I think it was like 2 minutes and 40 seconds, something like that.
Wow.
Yeah, and like I remember I pinned him 1, 2, 3, and he literally takes the pin and stands up and walks to the back because he was just like freaking out about his head being cut open. So yeah, he just like up to the back. That was it. And I'm like in the ring, like covered in his blood, like head to toe covered in his blood. Yeah, so that was probably one of the first like scary experiences I've had with hardcore. But like now I can laugh about it, but I remember like getting to the back and like being like, oh my God, we need to go to the hospital, and like freaking out. And then the promoter telling us after that we lost the venue because people were really offended. Yeah, so that's one of my proud moments in Ottawa with this. I lost about 3 venues in Ottawa for different places, and that was one of them.
Well, they kept asking you back, so it was worth it. Now, around that time, is that when you started getting some like American exposure?
Yeah, so ISW Interspecies Wrestling did a show in Connecticut. I want to say it was like 2009 or 10. And because we had a booker / backer who was from the States, and he wanted to run in his hometown. And on that show, we had tons of local talent. We had some Americans from places like Chikara, who came out and watched and were on the show too. And I think it was just a really great networking opportunity, and it didn't hurt that, again, I was in the same area as people like Evil Uno and Stu Grayson, who would drive down to those places. And if you can get another girl to hop in the car, that's always something people want. Like, there's high demand for that. So I was really lucky to meet those people and also have the resources to be able to get down to the States. So I did, I'm trying to think, like ISW, started doing a couple of Beyond wrestling shows. I did AIW in Cleveland. Yeah, a couple other places, like the small places like 2CW in New York. Yeah, just like all over the place in the States. And now I have an American passport. I got an American passport around 2011. So I can even like cross the border with no problems and tell them I'm wrestling and it's not an issue.
That's got to feel good, because the panic when you're going through illegally always sucks.
Yeah, it's like I remember the second that I had told a couple promoters recently, I was down wrestling in at Beyond in, where is it now? Worcester, Massachusetts, and a couple of the other bookers were like, "Oh, we'd like to have you. It's just tricky with the border." And I was like, "No, I have an American passport." And they were like, "Oh my God, well, we'll book you immediately." So like, It's kind of like a big deal now because so many people have been stopped, and it's become such a problem. So I'm one of the lucky ones.
For sure. Now, were you doing death matches in the States as well?
I've done a couple death matches in the States. The regulations are a little bit different because I was working in New York a lot for Beyond Wrestling and for WSU and for CZW even. And they have a lot of their shows in like New Jersey on purpose just to avoid some of the regulations that are a problem. So like I've mostly done like deathmatch specific shows in the States, but not really any like one-off death matches.
And then I think you would have kept blowing up in the States at that point, but you moved to the UK. Now, how did that all come about? And how is wrestling over there? Because you wrestled some amazing talent and were on some huge shows.
Oh man, I'm still like a little not wrestling in the UK anymore. So I moved over initially for my real job, my day-to-day job, which is a teacher, which a lot of people find surprising. I'm a high school teacher during the week. And there in the UK, there's like a huge shortage of teachers. They really need people to come because like the kids are a bit tricky and all this other stuff. So I got a job teaching over there, and I moved over just like not knowing anybody. I had like no contacts, no friends, no family, like nothing. So I was like, all right, I can do this because at the very least there's going to be wrestling. Like I know that. But I still had no contacts. Like I didn't really know anyone who was a wrestler over there. I literally had to like just throw it out on social media and be like, hey, I'm going to be here in September. Anyone who wants to book me, please feel free. Like, no problem. it was like starting from scratch all over again. So I had my very first show, I think, in October after getting there in September. And it was like this tiny little like Legion, kind of like the ones we have in Canada. Like, I think there was like 20 people there. It was like one of the most like little rinky dink shows I've been on. But I was like, at least it's something, you know, like it's somewhere to start. And then I wrestled someone from that show who was training with the Knight family for WAW and Bellatrix. And because I wrestled them, they then went and told the Knight family that I was there. And I got more bookings with them. So I got to work Soraya, which was awesome. I mean, it was like one of those matches that you kind of like hear that you're going to have, and then you like freak out for a month until it actually happens.
Yep.
Because like I'd heard all these like stories that she's like literally the toughest person that you're ever going to get in a ring with, and I was kind of like, oh yeah, well, I've wrestled Chris Dickinson and Drew Gulak, like whatever, it's not gonna be that bad. And then I meet her, and the second I like look in her eyes, I'm like, oh my god, I might die tonight, like this might be where I die. And she literally looked at me before our match, and I was like, all right, what do you want to do? And she just looks at me and goes, well, we're just going to have a fight, aren't we? And I was like, all right.
Okay.
And she's like, that's it. That's all we're doing. And then she walked away from me, and that was our planning. That was what we had figured out. So we go out there, and the first thing she does is just slap me as hard as she can in the face. Like literally the first thing. Busted my mouth open. I was like, all right, I guess we are just having a fight. And it was one of the best matches I had in England. So like some great talent there. And that was kind of like the start of me getting in with more people. I got in then after that with Pro Wrestling Eve, with PCW, with Tidal. It all just kind of like blossomed out from there. It was a lot of like word of mouth, and once again, just like getting to know the right people.
Do you think the match with Soraya was like a test almost to like see if you belong? This Canadian girl comes over, no one really knows too much about her yet, and then you have this match, you say she can hang, and then everyone just sees that from there? Or was it just who she is?
Yeah, I think it was almost exactly that, because I had the same thing kind of happen. I wrestled, no one has ever seen this match and no one really knows about it, but I wrestled Drew Gulak for Beyond Wrestling at one of their tapings a million years ago. And it was the same kind of thing where, you know, I talked to him before, and he was like, well, you know what moves I do, I know what moves you do, we'll be fine. And he like shook my hand real hard before we went out for the match. Like real grip handshake, and then we went out for the match. And he like didn't say a word to me through the whole match. He just like beat me up again, and then like again at the end of it, shook my hand real hard and said, "You did good," and that was it. And then I was like cool with Drew Gulak and cool with like a whole bunch of other people. So it felt like the same thing. It was like she was like trying to figure out if I was like going to be able to hang with them.
I think, like you said earlier, you're known for hardcore, but you're actually a very talented wrestler as well. And you can strike as well. So people might label you in one league, and then they get in there and they're like, oh, she can actually wrestle. And that might surprise people for a minute if they just think you're just a hardcore.
Yeah, I mean, I had a match a while ago with Millie McKenzie in Pro Wrestling Eve, and there was a couple people who after it were like, I didn't know that you could wrestle. And I was like, yeah, I kind of can. So it was, yeah, I totally get the hardcore stigma. So it's nice to like show people that every once in a while.
For sure. Now, how did you bring the Lego in? Because now everyone knows your name with Lego Deathmatch is synonymous.
Yes. So I always say, every time anyone talks to me about this, is that I did not invent this match. I was not the first person to do it. Okay. So I always have that disclaimer. I think that I was the first person who ran with it and really saw that it could be something marketable and something exciting. So in interspecies wrestling, there was a Lego match that happened between trying to think, Flip D Burger and Stinky the Homeless Guy. And it was real fun. And I remember watching it thinking like, oh, that looks fun. That looks really, really cool. It's all like bright, colorful, and really exciting. So I had asked if I could do one, right? I'd asked if I could do it with same guy, Flip. And I remember it was right at the time when Twitter was getting popular. It was like 2012 or something like that. So I had like just struck right while the iron was hot. And I started like tweeting about, we're going to do this Lego death match. We all know what it feels like when you step on a Lego. And I think that was like the big selling point for why this became such a viral thing, was because when you watch a death match and you have people with thumbtacks and barbed wire and panes of glass and all this other stuff, you don't really know what that feels like just as a fan watching it. Like, unless you've literally done a hardcore match, you don't really know what it's like. So you can kind of guess that it hurts, but you can't really embody it yourself. When you see a Lego match, you're like, oh, I know what that feels like. I can totally understand that. So I kind of like jumped on that and was like, you all know what this is like. You all know how bad this is. Like, this is why you want to watch this, because you can feel it. You get it. So me jumping on Twitter and really promoting and putting up like pictures from it and talking about it, I think then made more people want me to do matches for them, because then I could do the same thing, promote. People want, eyes on their product. So I think that just because I was the one who ran with it and really saw an opportunity, that's why it's my thing now.
And for years now, like, it just seems like it's amazing. It is your thing. And everyone can feel that pain. That's like one of the things like now I use in teaching is, if you pull someone's hair like a bad guy, people know what that feels like, or if you take away from them. So I love that you went there with that. That's such a good analogy. Now, who are some of the people you learned from throughout all these years that really helped you out?
Oh man. I will always go back and say that Fox is like my number one person that taught me things. She taught me a lot of humility and how to be humble. Because we would have these matches where she would really, really work with me and really, really teach me, like, this is what it means to put together a match. This is what it means to, like, get the crowd to feel bad for you. This is why I'm doing this. This is why I'm doing that. And I remember when I was like, it was like, oh God, like my 4th or 5th match in, and she was like literally explaining, she's like, I am going to do this here because of this. Like, it makes sense. So I was like so in debt to her for that kind of like explanation and that kind of like clarity. So I always say, like, number one, I wouldn't have even made it past my first year without Fox, like not even close. I think after that, it definitely would be Evil Uno, who was another huge factor in my training and in my development. When I first got to Ottawa, I had all the basics and I kind of had, main idea. Like I said, like I had gone through training and I had matches, but really finding out like who I wanted to be as a wrestler and what my style was going to be, I had like no idea. Like I just watched one of my first ever matches, like the one that you put up from 2007. Yep. And I was like, who was I doing a Russian leg sweep? Like, what is this? Like, I would never, ever anymore do that. So Uno was like asking me, is like, well, what do you want to do? Like, what kind of person do you want to be? And like, that's where I started to watch some Japanese wrestling, because I had mentioned that I loved like hardcore death matches. And he's like, well, you need to watch like strong style then. You need to watch Japanese strong style because it's like wrestling form of hardcore. And so I watched, Masato Tanaka, absolutely fell in love with everything that he did, because everything he did just looked like it was like crushing your head in every time he did it. Like, I haven't met Masato Tanaka yet, but he's been like around places that I've been, and he's been like on shows that I've like gone to. And I just know that like the day that I meet Masato Tanaka, I'm just gonna like cry and not be able to say anything. So yeah, definitely that. And like lately, it's again been all this like New Japan stuff that I've been watching. Ishii, big time. Like even like John Moxley when he's in New Japan has been huge for me. I love Hanma and Makabe, like all these like big dudes that just like come in and just want to fight you.
Yep.
Suzuki, of course. Because I think to me, I just want my wrestling to be like, if this guy was going to fight you, he would kill you and he would actually like get you in a fight. That's what I want to see. I want to see
Yep.
something that looks like people are having a fight. So that's my biggest influence, like in the last 13 years.
I love it. No, when you said Ishii and all these guys, I'm like, man, these are who I love now too. That's who I'm trying to get more like my character. When you said that, and then you and Eric had that match, he's like, you told me like, I'm just gonna hit you really hard, and I'm like, oh, he switched up from what I remember. So it was really cool, and to watch that match, it was just strikes and like,
oh man,
up and
I love that
down.
match.
It was really,
Love
really
that.
good. I was like, okay, so now we got this. Plus, you have the Lego stuff, so you're just doing amazing things. I think you're gonna do even bigger things. But right now, kind of aside from the wrestling, it's with wrestlers. But if you had to be locked in a house with 3 other wrestlers, who would they be during this quarantine?
Okay, can they be like independent wrestlers? They have to be big
Yes.
time. Okay,
No,
all
it
right.
could be anybody.
Okay, I'm gonna go. I think I've got 3 good ones. So I'm gonna go first of all, Mick Foley, just because he's like I didn't even mention Mick Foley for my influences, whatever. So obviously my all-time number 1 favorite wrestler ever. I did an essay on him in training. I don't know if you remember this, about Cactus Jack and how much I love Cactus Jack and how great he is. And he just seems like a super nice, fun guy. So like I would love to like have the time just like sit down and talk to him and just ask about his life and hear some stories. So I think number 1 would be Mick Foley. I think number 2 would probably be my tag partner from the UK, Rhea O'Reilly. If you haven't seen her or don't know about her, go check her out immediately. Like, I mean, now, because she's amazing. Rhea O'Reilly, just because we have a lot of the same interests. So we both like to read and like comics, and we both like gaming and watching the same kind of stuff. We're just really similar people in terms of our interests. So I would say her. And then probably number 3 would be Alley Cat. Just because she's like a great time. Like I've hung out with her a few times, had a night out or 2 with her, and she's like real fun. So I think like keeping me like positive and having a good time, she would be the best one for that.
That's perfect. Now, you mentioned gaming a few times. Have you guys started your gaming channel? I know it was something that you were talking about.
Yes, so we definitely, me and my boyfriend have a Twitch channel that we've started. We're all set up. We've been streaming for a couple weeks now. So it's been great because like obviously I'm used to my weekends being completely booked up, and it's very strange sitting at home on Saturdays and Sundays. So we've been streaming a whole bunch of really cool stuff. For those who don't know, my boyfriend is a very intense collector of retro video games, especially Nintendo. So he has just recently acquired his 500th Super Nintendo game.
Oh.
And we have about 300 other games as well, N64, NES, GameCube, all these other things. So we mostly stream retro games. So like just, this past couple weeks, I've been doing Ocarina of Time for N64. We just got like a couple random Super Nintendo games in there. He played one called Pocky and Rocky. We've played some Super Mario, obviously. We've done some Donkey Kong, like just tons of like really old school games. And it's all like the original hardware. Like we have the consoles and the cartridges, like it's all real stuff. So my big thing is like, I haven't played these games. Like I wasn't a kid who grew up with a Nintendo. I was doing like sports and other stuff. So if anyone has any games that they like want to see, like I'll be experiencing them for the very first time. So like
Awesome.
I just played like Super Mario 3 recently for the first time ever.
Wow.
And people were like freaking out because I was like reacting to everything that's like so nostalgic for them. So yeah, if you have any games that you want to see, please like hit me up, let me know. Definitely open for that.
Where can people see your stream?
So if you go to twitch.tv/like Starr Scream, Starr with 2 R's.
Awesome. Now, when wrestling is all said and done, how do you want to be remembered?
Oh man. I think I want to be remembered just as a good wrestler. And I mean that in like the most simple, plain way possible because I've been really fortunate that I have been active in wrestling from a time where women's wrestling was not respected at all, like at all, to a point where it's now, main eventing WrestleMania. And that's such a crazy thing to me to think that when I started, I remember people literally telling me all you have to aspire to is to like be hot and, get naked and whatever, like wear a bikini. And that's your role in wrestling is to look good. To now, I could literally, if I really wanted to, I could try to be a huge part of like the biggest company in the world. So that's crazy. So if for me, thinking about being remembered means that I was just a good wrestler, not even like a good women's wrestler or a good hardcore wrestler. If I can just, without any context around it, be a good wrestler that someone enjoyed my work, that would be a win to me because it means that every single bit of stigma around both women's wrestling and hardcore wrestling has now been eliminated and people can just enjoy it for what it is and what it deserves to be enjoyed as.
That's amazing. That's awesome. I love it. No, that's a really good answer. I think that's what everyone should want to aspire to be remembered as.
Yep.
Now, just because this is kind of like question, here we go, and we're just kind of, some of them, you don't know some of them. What did I miss, and what would you like to tell everybody before we wrap things up?
Oh man, I think we've pretty much hit everything. I think the basic thing is, for me, I just want everyone to stick together and realize that this is a temporary thing that we're going through right now. I know this might date this podcast a little bit, but wrestling is one of these things that, as someone who came into it with no knowledge and no like real deep love for it like everyone else did when they started, I've really grown to understand how important it is to people and how deep this business is and how deep and how intensely people love this sport and this industry. So I have absolutely no fear that it's going anywhere. I think that we're going to recover. And I think that it's really amazing how much resilience and how much togetherness people have already shown in this time. So I just think everyone needs to hear that it's all going to be okay. We're gonna keep going and get through it, and you will all see me again. If you are someone who has been to a show that I've been on and you want to see me again and you're looking forward to it, it's going to happen. If you haven't seen me in person and you're looking forward to it, it's going to happen. Just, I'm like one of these like sickeningly positive people. So I'm just trying to spread some positivity here.
I love it. No, thank you very much. Now, where can people find you on the internet if they want to talk with you or just see some of your matches?
So definitely best place is on Twitter. That's where I'm most active. So at Addy Starr on Twitter. Instagram is great too, at Addy Stars and Stripes. You should also definitely check out the band that does my entrance music. They're called Powerbomb. They are the greatest pro wrestling inspired hardcore band with screamo influences from the greater Toronto area of all time. They're amazing. It's also my boyfriend's band, so kind of biased, but so they do my music. You can check them out at powerbombhc.bandcamp.com. And like I said earlier, best way right now, if you want to interact or support, even if you want to be one of those amazing people that supports independent wrestlers at this time, hop over to my Twitch channel, and you can follow me. Just be a follower. It tells you when we're online, when we're streaming. If you want to be even cooler and even more awesome, you can subscribe to our channel and hang out with us when we do our streams, and it's super fun. So the Twitch channel again, twitch.tv/like Starscream, Starr with 2 R's.
Thank you so much for doing this. I really do appreciate it.